Hello, and welcome to the COP28 Cryosphere Pavilion. I'm Gabrielle Kleber. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Tromsø in Norway, and I'm here to present today's panel, which is the Pathways to Transform Safeguarding the Cryosphere Through Mindset and Lifestyle. The moderator of today's event will be Ankita Manjunath. She is an interior architect and the Brahma Kumaris Environment Initiative Youth Representative. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gabby, and good morning and welcome to all our distinguished speakers, our esteemed participants, and it is an insightful session today on how to transform. It is pathways to transform and through mindset and through lifestyle. So as Gabby introduced me already, my name is Ankita and I'll be your moderator for this session. And this dialogue we are about to embark on is transcending disciplines and generations, and we are recognizing the importance of minute changes in our mindset to secure the future of the cryosphere. So, our session could uncover or may answer a lot of your questions, a lot of the undeniable truth that safeguarding the cryosphere is a necessity more than just technological interventions. We need a mindset shift. And that is why we're here. So let's shift that perspective and let's transform collectively to reinvent our lifestyles and to maintain resilience and adopt a few regenerative approaches to pave sustainable ways forward. So, to guide us through this exploration, I would say, we are honored to have our experts on the panel. I would like to introduce Pam Pearson. She's the director of the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative, and she offers a wealth of knowledge and experience in addressing cryospheric challenges on an international scale. And I would like her to come and have a short introduction because she won't be with the panel, but she will speak beforehand.
Yes, thank you so much. And I wanted to sort of set the scene for what we're discussing today, because the cryosphere is changing faster than really any other part of the planet. It's very sensitive. It's been put in terms of being the canary in the coal mine, especially in relation to the Arctic, but things are changing rapidly in Antarctica and also in mountain regions. You have the same levels of warming essentially in the Arctic, Antarctica, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, and most mountain regions around the world, 2 to 4 times the rest of the planet. But what we have been focusing on more and more is the impact of those regions on the rest of the world. Those of us who care about these regions, who think they're beautiful, who like to be in them for their innate beauty, are beginning to recognize that for most of the planet, who maybe never experience ice and snow, these are regions that are important to their very lives. They're important to the continued existence of low-lying countries or coastlines or communities, because when the ice sheets really begin melting, sea level rise with our current emissions will be unexpectedly fast. And we need to think beyond sort of our normal, human short-term thinking and really take on board the long-term thinking of many, many generations, because what we can set in train with our ice sheets can go on and will go on really for thousands of years. One of the new bits of science that we took on board here is also the polar ocean current, the Antarctic overturning bottom water. That may sound like a very long thing, but it was actually spoken about by UN Secretary General Guterres last week, because that really is something driven by the fresh water coming off the Antarctic ice sheet that really drives the polar oceans, and not just the polar oceans, but via that, the entire ocean current circulation system. Most people know about the AMOC in the North Atlantic. That's just a little piece of it. It's really driven by this system of currents that begins in Antarctica, and it has already slowed down by about 36 to 40%. This is such an ancient and slow moving system that we know that it has locked in this change, this slowdown in the ocean system for 300 to 400 years at least already. And that is just one thing that very few, humans even pay attention to, but it drives the nutrient cycle, it drives the carbon cycle. And again, once an ice sheet really tips, the latest science is showing that it's going to continue for generations. The same goes for mountain glaciers. They have so much warming built into their system that even if we did very low emissions, we wouldn't see much of a change in their loss. It's just steep, steep, steep right now. But if we have low emissions, we begin to see a change around 2060, 2070, and by the end of the century, a glacier that under high emissions would no longer exist is still going to be there. Maybe just half of it or a third, but it's still going to be there. Why is this important then in this context of mindset and lifestyle? I think that humans in the past have been naturally multi-generational. We lived often, especially farmers, on the same land for generations. It was important to one, farmer that not just his children, but grandchildren, their great-grandchildren would still have something to live on. People planted trees knowing that they would never have a chance to harvest the nuts that might come from them. Or a pear tree, for example, it can take 20 to 30 years before it begins bearing fruit. I think in our modern society, we're no longer thinking in this multi-generational manner. And to me, as someone who follows Cryosphere, that's the mindset that needs to shift. We need to understand and care that what we're doing today could lock in things and already has locked in some things that are going to affect not only our children and our grandchildren, but going out 6, 7, 8, many more generations. And living our lifestyles within the boundaries that actually do exist, even if we don't like to admit to them all the time, is going to be a really important piece of the puzzle. I think most of us know how to live sustainably, really. We've learned about that. Do we do it? Probably not in most cases. Maybe in small ways, but what we really need is this greater change. And I think that one of the messages that is going to be important to put forward is the idea that the lifestyles that would be sustainable and the planet that we would be living on is actually a lot more pleasant than what we have right now. You're going to be hearing from Mark, who I've worked with for many years now. But works very much also on things related to air pollution and air quality. They're intimately tied to climate. We would have much cleaner air if we lived a low carbon lifestyle, a sustainable lifestyle. We would walk more. We would not go back to caves. But if one tries to think in one's mind what kind of a life we would be living in a way that would preserve the cryosphere for many generations, it's actually not a bad life. It's probably a better life than what we're living right now. And so I think if we can take that on board and not look at this as something where things are being taken away, but being given to us, I think that can be a very powerful way of looking at the changes that are inevitably in front of us. The question is, as much of the debate today at this COP is, are we going to phase out or phase down fossil fuels? Are we going to aim for 1.5 or allow the planet to warm to a point where, for example, there are no more glaciers left in countries like Sweden and Norway, or in the Alps, which is what would be the case at 2 degrees. Is that the kind of world we want, where we're sort of forced to change, or do we want to embrace and enjoy the change and look at the positives? So for this panel, I would encourage you to explore that as well. I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole thing, but I would simply sit here coughing and sneezing the entire time, and I do not want to get my other fellow panelists sick. So thank you for coming here. Thank you for your work. And I look forward to hearing your views and the valuable contribution that this can make. This is the last day of the COP. Things like this need to be paid attention to as part of the COP as well. And thank you for coming here and for doing this important side event here as things wrap up and we move into, hopefully, a solution that will save the cryosphere, save the planet, and save ourselves. So thank you.
Before we ask you a question, before you leave, how do you perceive your relationship between your own individual choices and the health of the cryosphere? So, since we're talking about lifestyle changes, how do you see your individual lifestyle changes that have actually that help in maintaining the
Oh,
cryosphere?
I think it's the things again that we all know, right? Live smaller. We don't need as much space. Use fossil fuels less. I think that's an important way to think about this, right? Where I live right now, it's driven entirely by electricity. And one can actually opt into only being powered by renewables. Now, that is a little bit of greenwashing, but still, if enough people, choose that for their energy provider, then maybe that pushes things forward a little bit. So when I say use less fossils, a big one that I think many of us in the West use, we drive too much. And one of the joys often of coming to COPs is almost every single COP, the people here get a local public transportation card and use it. And what has been sort of a shock to me is talking to some of the people who live here. This is a wonderful public transportation system. It's fast. But if you look at it, the people who are on there are people who are workers, and the upper class drives, and that's completely unnecessary. It's faster. And so things like that are really important too. And I have to admit, I lived close to Copenhagen for years, but it was the COP15 that introduced me to the public transportation system in Copenhagen, and that's all I use right now. So I think getting over humps like that is really important, and associating them with cryosphere preservation, at least. There is actually, for example, a sea ice study. 1 ton of CO2 removes 3 meters of sea ice. And so when we think about it in that term, what we're doing actually can make a difference. And we have some glaciologists who've done something similar. I don't know. I don't think we have anyone here who can give me the figures, so I'm not going to quote it. But when we make those associations, that the little bit that we do actually does save a little bit of ice. That's an important way of thinking as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So, thank you to Pam for sharing her insightful, efforts and her change in that consciousness and what she explained about the glacial issues. So, I want to go ahead and invite our next speakers. So, I'm going to invite Professor Mark Lawrence. He's a renowned scientific director at the Research Institute for Sustainability, and he's bringing invaluable scientific insights to this panel. And I would also like to call upon Golo Pills. He's a trusted advisor on renewable energy from the Brahma Kumaris, and he provides a unique blend of spiritual wisdom and practical expertise in sustainable solutions. So together we are going to go through this journey of actionable strategies, and hopefully we can cultivate some eco-conscious choices together. Don't you think so?
Let's hope.
Yes, let's hope.
We look forward.
Yeah, let's all be a catalyst for this transformative discussion. So again, I would pose the same question to both of you. How do you perceive the relationship between your individual lifestyle choices and the health of the cryosphere? So I would like Mark.
Well, thank you, Akita, and it's a nice opportunity to be here together with you all, and thanks for the invitation for this. It's great to have an opportunity to see my old colleague Pam Pearson again after quite a while. And the answer to that question is, of course, one that has a lot of very subtle facets to it. So when it comes to the question about living sustainably, I wrote a blog article on that at the beginning of this year, where I had been asked the question a number of times over the last decade, building up the institute that previously called the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. Now we've changed our name to Research Institute for Sustainability. And I'd get asked the question, how can I live sustainably? And of course, short of saying, well, buy a very good knife and learn survival skills and go live in the woods, which doesn't work for everybody. And if 8 billion people were to try that, it wouldn't be sustainable either. Then it really becomes very difficult in our current life situation, our societal structures, actually to live in a way that is sustainable in the sense of the word that we as we have defined it at our institute or as others have defined it. But if you change the question around to how can I live in support of sustainability, then based on that, I came up with a number of principles that had come out of discussions, gelled and crystallized out of discussions over the last years. And so I invite anybody who's interested in that to have a look at the blog article rather than going through those, but to make the big connection to that in the end, our systems are tied together very tightly. Our systemic structures and our individual structures are actually very tightly tied together. So the systems influence the individuals, but again, the individuals and their work towards transformations influence the systems. And one of the most vulnerable systems that we have on this earth is the cryosphere. As Pam just pointed out very well, the changes in the cryosphere are happening at a much greater rate than in any other environment or nearly any other environment, any other major environment around the world. And because of that, then the changes that we make on our individual lifestyles, for each of us individually, it's not going to change at all by any means. Even if 100,000 or even a million of us come together, it's still only going to have a drop in that. But those changes step by step influence the structures, and those structures step by step then influence the overall environment, and that's what influences the Arctic. So it's a little bit of a distant question, but it's one that is very, very important. And then there's another issue of that comes down to the attitudes about our fellow people and about our fellow creatures. But I'll save that for another question later.
Okay, so coming to what are the challenges that you believe are specific for these lifestyle changes? That if someone wants to do some lifestyle changes to help safeguard the environment, let's say, or the cryosphere in particular, what can one expect? What are the challenges can one expect?
Well, I see many challenges. I'll speak about three of them. One of them is the challenge of the structures that you have around you. So if everybody else is living a certain way, for instance, if everybody else is eating sugar and you want to improve your diet and they're eating sugar at a party, if everybody else is drinking alcohol at a party and you want to cut down on your alcohol consumption, if everybody else is working through the night because they want to get further accomplishments, if everybody else around you is driving a large car, we've seen that in our neighborhoods, that once one comes in with a large SUV, then the next one pops in, the next one pops in, and so on. So these kinds of pressures, that's one of the fundamental challenges that we face. And it takes a lot of, not just strength, it takes a lot of desire to hold up against that challenge if you want to live following whatever principles you espouse. You can take the ones that I have, or people have other principles at the same time. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. The second one is very closely related to that, and that's the availability of sustainability supporting lifestyles. So I switched to eating a plant-based diet 10 years ago now, almost 10 years ago. And the challenge of finding plant-based food has changed dramatically in those 10 years. I remember at the COP in Bonn, Germany, lots of people are vegetarian. You'd think it'd be pretty easy. And I ended up bringing my own food most of the time. Surprisingly to me, now the last couple of COPs, where in regions that aren't as well known for pushing plant-based diets in Egypt and Dubai, there's a wealth of available food. There's no problem with finding plant-based food here. So, but if you want to change to plant-based diet, if you want to change to driving an electric vehicle, if you want to use public transport, but you live in an area where there isn't public transport, anywhere, anything that you want to change, if the system structure isn't already there, then you have to push to create that system structure in the first place. And the third challenge is actually the first of my 7 principles, which is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We get too quickly in the mindset of, if I can't do this perfectly, then I won't bother at all. And that's a major challenge, because it's a common mindset that we have, and getting away from that mindset and saying, well, 80% is a heck of a lot better than 20% in this direction, even if I can't get up to 99 or 100%. So those are 3 challenges that I would talk about that we face with this.
Thank you so much for that input. So Golo, tell me, how do you perceive your relationship between your individual choices and the health of the cryosphere? So, what are your
Well,
systems?
it's the cryosphere is far away, but somehow, of course, through my personal lifestyle, I will have an effect on my emissions, and they will add up, and that is causing climate change, and that will affect all the cryosphere. And I live most of the time in India, and interestingly, when I came first time to India, that was 84, 85, I sort of realized that India has a vast potential for renewable energies. And I thought, wow, a lot of sunshine. And at the same time, I saw all these ladies with a headload of wood coming out of the forest and cutting down the last jungles, literally the last trees, because they were cooking, it was their primary fuel. And so I thought, wow, we should do something. And I brought some solar cells and a little electrical car and showed it there in the Brahma Kumaris to the senior management. And Brahma Kumaris, as the name says, is administrated by women. And when they saw this first little electric car going around in the courtyard, they said, oh, wow, that's interesting. And so from there, a whole journey sort of began. It was like a little seed. And we set up a department for renewable energies. And meanwhile, after 25 years, we are the biggest institutional user of solar energy in India. And we have 5,000 meditation centers also. And we rolled out renewable energy projects for all our centers. We started with 25 with a project to give 60 centers like a prototype 5 kilowatt system with battery. And at that time, this was quite cutting edge project. Nobody in India had much of photovoltaic. And we used inverters from Australia and solar plates from Siemens. It was like batteries from India because they were available. So it was quite cutting edge, get all the stuff together. And we sort of raised the idea and the awareness within the institution. And the idea behind it was to slowly roll out renewable energy projects more and make the institution more aware and more green. And on an institutional level, reduce the emissions per se. On an individual level, of course, I had also my personal journey, and you said nicely, don't be the enemy if you're not become perfect or something.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
That's a very nice, I have to note that down. That's a very nice statement. I somehow got involved. Our senior Dadishi asked us, every country should build a house. I got in touch with a German architect, Professor Gernot Minker, who is quite well-known environmental architect. And so I somehow started to build a solar energy house based on mud bricks. So I had to select the soil, make some testing. Is it good enough? The composition is all right. Then bake it in the sun. We made adobes, made the forms, put the mud in, mix it with sand, and slowly build a solar energy house, a green building, but with your own hands, which is a very interesting experience because you get your hands dirty. I'm from construction business, so it's not that far away. But I built basically the house out of mud bricks. It has a passive solar architecture. It means we have cross ventilation, we have shading elements with the windows. So it's adapted to the local climate. And I, of course, equipped the whole system with a wind solar power system, which at that time a hybrid system, which was also cutting edge 25 years ago. And so we sort of was able. I was very lucky that I was able to build the house myself, equip it with renewable energy system, and keep the carbon footprint very, very low. In addition, the house is double wall, so in summer it's an insulated wall. And I planted trees, so shading, all these kind of features are there. Now it's a very, very beautiful building, and in winter, Mount Abu gets zero, and people come inside and they say, "Oh wow, where's the heating?" And I say, "It's like that. It's naturally like that." So this helped to reduce my personal carbon footprint. I also acquired a electrical bicycle 5 years ago, and I'm probably the first prototype foreigner in Mount Abu with an electrical bicycle, and everybody looks when I bicycle past. Now already there are 4 electric bicycles in Mount Abu. So slowly, by providing an example, people see and then they copy. We also got engaged in tree plantation, which was a bit of a battle 20 years ago, because in India the goats come, the humans come, everybody is sort of grabbing your little sapling away, and it's like a fight to bring trees up, but we succeeded. at least with some. So a lot of personal engagement was there to keep my carbon footprint low. Of course, for example, I come to the COP and I feel sometimes a pinch of sadness that I use the aeroplane. I like very much ships and would love to come with a sailing ship, carbon neutral, but it's not available somehow on that long distances, you know. Here, as you said, metro system I like very much, and me and Sonia, after our climate studio, which we're doing, we always walk back, and we try maximum to use also the metro here. So I'm trying on a personal level to look as much as possible into my personal carbon footprint. We have also initiated a offset mechanism. We have created a Brahma Kumaris Environment Initiative. We have a plastic-free campaign, but we have also a CO2 travel offset. So at the end of the year, I put a bit of money into the trust to offset my personal carbon emissions as good as possible. Another thing which is very helpful, I would say, is if you if you share things and you also receive things. For example, my brother is a doctor. He's a bit more bigger now than me, so I get a lot of good cloth from him, for example. And and I like this idea, you know, that I don't waste things and they stay within the family, literally. I also look when I need some technical gadgets. Quite often, I look for secondhand in order to keep the carbon footprint as low as possible. So there is a lot of opportunities you can do on a personal level. Walk the talk. You can inspire people. You can work with your own institution with whom you are connected. As I said, now Brahma Kumaris is now the biggest institutional user of solar energy in India. We're a research organization. We do workshops, trainings, and we try to bring out the good news, what is possible, and we try to inspire all our members, but also the people who come to get the ball rolling and change the awareness, the consciousness, that people wake up and they understand the relation between my personal footprint, my awareness, my personal footprint, and what happens then at the end also in the cryosphere. So we're on the job since 25 years. It takes time and it's a step-by-step process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Golo, for sharing. But do you feel like there are challenges there as well, like as an individual to execute these, sustainable choices or these sustainable lifestyle choices? Do you think there are challenges for you? Have you personally, faced anything that you want to share?
I can write 5 books
Of all the challenges.
of the challenges which I faced. Whenever you bring new technologies or new concepts, it's like a shift, a change in paradigm. And it's mindset changes are probably the most difficult to initiate because you're dealing with habits of the people. You deal with their conditioning. You deal with their inner neuronal networks, you know, how they have been brought up, how they used to do things, and suddenly you come with something different and you face actually resistance. You face sometimes resistance in yourself. I appreciate very much that you are on a plant-based diet. I'm a vegetarian since 40 years, and sometimes I contemplate to go vegan, but then when there's a yummy cheese, you know, I fail. So, you know, so there is resistance within yourself for lifestyle changes, you know, because we're used to certain taste or to certain comfortable habits. But of course, when you try to roll out your ideas and inspire others or inspire an institution, of course, you deal with a mindset and old habits, and it's always a slow process, and you face resistance and challenges on the way. Now I'm 60 plus and take things a bit more easy, and I meditate luckily regular, which keeps me healthy, mentally healthy, and helps me also to think outside of the box. So yes, it's a journey, I would say, and it's in the aftermath, I can say it's a very interesting and lovely journey. If I would have known in the beginning what's in the pipeline, I would have probably
Scared and overwhelmed.
probably quite scared, but you know, but it's totally all right, and it's a beautiful journey because you're doing the right thing, and this gives you a positive feedback loop, you know, and that puts you in a totally different space. You know, you can be happy, you can be confident, and you can radiate that out, and that helps a lot in inspiring people also to go green.
Yeah, you are an inspiration, Bodo. You are my inspiration.
I
Thank
know.
you so much that you've done for the organization. And
See,
it's
beautiful,
amazing.
beautiful, positive feedback loops.
Yeah,
Here we
and
are.
it's amazing because, I feel like for youth, I'm talking on the perspective of a youth because I'm the only youth here, except for you, maybe. Both of you actually. You're
I feel, I feel
energy.
25. Yes,
Yeah,
right.
you both look like. But anyway, for me, I feel like a collective change is what keeps youth moving. Like if it is a collective effort from everyone, like if okay, suppose I'm trying to go vegan, and maybe looking at me, someone will go like, okay, maybe I can join you as well, and we can sort of have a journey together and we can see who one ups the other. Like it's like a competition. Okay, no, I didn't eat today. Did you eat? Like, it's like that with us, like for youth. So I feel like coming to bringing whatever both of you said, there is peer pressure. There is, there are challenges where you face that, okay, it's resistance from within, but then you overcome that with maybe a community.
We see the resistance.
Yeah.
We see the resistance here at the top. So it's on the individual, but it's also on organizational level, national level, and supranational level, the whole world. You see what's going on since we know the effect of emissions on the cryosphere on the world. And I think since 28 years, we are debating if we should reduce our emissions. And still today, it's crunch time, and negotiations are going on the final text.
Coming to a few more, insightful questions, I would like to ask, as a scientist addressing key challenges of the Anthropocene, what connections do you see between systemic transformations and sustainable development, particularly in the context of the cryosphere?
Well, sustainable development is what I would say is the goal, is the overarching challenge that we're facing, or finding ways to live towards sustainability, more in support of sustainability. And systemic transformations are one component of sustainable development. I'd say there's two major components of sustainable development. The systemic transformations are the transformations of our big systems. So the transformation of the energy system, of the food system. So we need an energy transformation, an agricultural transformation, a mobility transformation, a production transformation, consumption transformation, and then comes the more subtle parts of sustainability. So then the sustainable development goals depict that nicely. We have ones that are more hard goals that are environmentally oriented, like the SDG 13, which is the climate, and 14, which is oceans, 15, which is on land. And you have ones around energy and so on. And then you have ones that are more society oriented goals, like gender equality and good education and good work and peace in particular. And so the systemic transformations are one component of that. It's the emission systems and the energy and agriculture and so on systems that lead to emissions, that lead to harms on the environment, but also now more and more systemically protect us from the impacts of the environment on us due to our impacts on the environment. So the adaptation systems are also part of sustainable transformation. And so that's a major part of sustainable development. And the other part, I guess, is the more societally oriented transformations, which you can consider that systemic, but I would say these are more about attitudes and about relationships between people, gender equality and peace and good work, the respect of workers from employers and so on, is on where we get much more into the societal aspects. And that I mentioned the word respect, which I wanted to get back to before, but I didn't want to talk too long before. In terms of respect, I brought something special today. I'm wearing a polar bear tie. With the bright sun and 30-degree temperatures outside, it does seem a little bit weird wearing a polar bear tie. I got this one at the Pop in Bonn at a Cryosphere event, and I wear it very often to remind us of a couple of things of mindsets. One is the polar bear used to be the poster child for climate change. It's not so much anymore. But it certainly depicted the challenges of the transformations in the Arctic for life, beyond human life that we have in the Arctic, and reminds us of the importance of respect for non-human life in the world and respect for our future generations in terms of having wonderful creatures like polar bears around. But it also reminds us of something else, which is that the polar bear was the poster child, and the polar bears suffer, but the indigenous communities in the Arctic also suffer horribly. The Sami and many others, and they have begun raising their voices very, very strongly. And I'm very pleased to be working together with many of them from our institute in terms of understanding how we can more effectively bring those voices together with the understanding from science that's needed to help to support systemic transformation. But bring that form of respect in. And I think that there's really a lack of respect in humanity or in humankind. I'm not sure I'd call it humanity. In this lack of respect for the way that others live and the challenges that others have in their living. And when we talk about the Arctic change, we talk about the cryosphere, and we've talked about all the changes in glaciers and ice sheets and to the animals. But we do need to remember that there are communities that have long, long traditions. And it actually is up on the wall. Changes in climate limit on traditional fishing and hunting practices. Limit, I think, is a very diplomatically put understatement, and they devastate the traditional practices. And that's a shame, because in the same way as preserving an environment, preserving creatures that we've known in our environment, like polar bears in the future, preserving cultures is also something that we can respect and value. And these are well-established, long-standing traditional cultures that have a special relationship with the environment, from which I think we can learn some, and in terms of respect, rather than just accepting, okay, they'll be wiped out after a while, just like the low island states and low-lying island states and coastal regions and so on. But they'll just move inland, and we'll pick them up somewhere else and so on. That's sad that we missed the respect part. So then to come back to your question, systemic transformations and sustainable development, I'd say the systemic transformations is one leg of sustainable development. And for me, respect and things around that, solidarity, kindness, a sense of societal belonging and humaneness in the whole is the other leg to sustainable development.
That's very true. Belongingness and that connectedness that one feels that, see, this is our one planet and we need to do everything that we can to safeguard it as communities, as individuals, and as a system. It's so difficult to transform the system. That's why communities are trying to go in and just do how much ever they can. It's lovely to see all the initiatives that people have started, all the organizations that are contributing. And thank you so much for that answer. Okay, Golo. So you are a trusted advisor on renewable energy for the Brahma Kumaris. And that is a big, big leg to have. So advocating sustainable solutions through ethical and value-based approach is a very different perspective. So how do you believe these considerations can play a role in shaping more sustainable solutions? And how can we link it to the cryosphere?
Well, I think if you are engaged in clean technology or in any environmental project, you need some sort of foundation, like something has to drive you, because quite often it's not the financial incentives which are there, especially when I started. Renewable energy was not at all business oriented or something like that. It's for more like crazy engineers, some old hippies, funny people who were in solar 30 years ago, like quirky people. There was no specific education even for all these areas, like there was no environmental engineering. There were all what you find at universities nowadays. It didn't exist at that time. These were mostly people which came from other areas and we were motivated by the idea to do something good and to create clean technology and to replicate it and to give it others. This was a bit, the motivation behind was a bit to help, actually, and to demonstrate that something can work with the power of sun. So some people were driven more by, let's say, technological aspects, something should work and we can improve it a little bit here or there. And other people were more by this idea of I should help the world, I should help the people, I should save the planet. At that time in the 80s, there was a big movement in Germany of the Green Party, and the forest in Germany was suffering by acid rain. And a lot of people were worried, by the emissions of the coal power plants and so on. And so the idea already in the 80s in Germany was pretty popular, that we should do something and that we have to protect the forest. And the Germans, they love their forest. So I feel an ethical foundation is at the heart of all these activities. And when I came to the Brahma Kumaris and first propagated these ideas, interestingly, in India, Surya is a deity, is the deity of sun. And everybody said, oh, making cooking, for example, with the sun, so there's a divine energy in the cooked food. So everybody liked this combination and sort of accepted this also. Then in India, of course, there is an economic reason also. In India, gas, fossil fuels are costly, relatively costly. The income is relatively low, but there's an immense pressure also on the environment because high density, high population, small land mass. So India is actually in a very tight spot. And deforestation is a big, big issue, especially Rajasthan, which is a semi-arid area. The forests there are under constant threat. And Mount Abu, for example, is a environmental protected zone, is under the Ministry of Environment, and forest is forest area. But the locals go inside and they cut their firewood, and slowly they have them ways and means to get every day their firewood out. And you come every year and you see one tree less, another tree less, another tree less, and slowly, and there is not much left. So there are various motivations which actually can drive you. But I think at the bottom, it boils down that you have love for the creation, love for the world around you, and you would like to do something good for it, and you love to inspire other people to do good, to use resources, things which are available, and to live in harmony with the surrounding. And in India, this is a very practical concept of living, because you see it really, how forests disappear, how rivers get dirty, or they also disappear because of pumping. The pressure on the land is immense. So it's a very deep motivation on the inside. Love and compassion, I would say, that was for me personally the big motivation. And of course, if you have such an ethical foundation, it translates into all aspects of your life, and ultimately also reduces your personal footprint of people whom you're working together, all the projects which you're doing. We have lots of projects also where we work with villages or with local people, and we try to inspire them also. For example, we promoting since 20 years the solar cooking box, and try to roll it out in villages. We have the solar lantern, which we are promoting and trying to bring it out in small villages. So people have a little light in the evening. Also, there are a lot of power cuts in India still. And so we're trying to create little seeds of hope through your personal activity, but also through little projects which we're doing with the local community. We have a radio station, Radio Madhuban, and there, for example, we have an environmental program also, where we try to bring up these topics and try to teach people to sort of at least have an idea what can be done, and we try to help them also to make the gadgetry at least available. So I think ethical foundation is super important for everything, because without that, it's going to be difficult. At least I'm on a volunteer basis, in India since 30 years. So I'm not driven by personal income considerations or this and that. And somehow now solar or wind or this whole transition has become a big business also. And I heard calculation study by Deloitte towards the World Economic Forum published a couple of days ago. And the study just said that there's 43 trillion US dollar business opportunities if we go net zero until 2050. 43 trillion is a huge amount. And so, of course, now a lot of businesses, they are jumping in and their motivation might be different. That might be more profit-oriented motivation, but however, at least it goes in the right direction. So that's a bit of a, on one side, I see now that solar becomes super popular and everybody has now a small wind or solar cell and so many houses. It's quite good. But on the other side, it has become also a big business and the initial goodwill has been a bit replaced by purely economic considerations.
Yeah.
But it's okay. At least it's happening.
It's happening.
You also see that with plant-based diets and with other things that they start off with sort of a small hippie-like community that is interested in it, and then somewhere or another it catches on.
Yeah,
and then suddenly it's either a trend or a fad, or it's an opportunity to make a lot of money, or both.
Yeah. And the vegan is quite costly. And sometimes if you look what's inside, you're thinking twice, because they make a money out of it,
So it's not necessarily healthier if it's just a bunch of chemicals put together and with tofu swished together to make it look like some kind of imitation meat. Good steamed vegetables is a completely different thing than a lot of what is done in the sort of to make it look good. And I mean, this making it look good that goes along with a point that was brought up last night. Responsible yachts that are solar powered and so on. But it's hard to imagine a yacht being responsible, or maybe that's a limited market. It's not going to be having huge impact. But where it's really important is in electrical vehicles, and people are now going towards electrified SUVs because the SUVs are big enough to hold very large battery arrays. They can get the distance that they want, but by the time you put this huge battery array in the vehicle, so that you don't have to charge it so often so you can drive a long distance, that battery array takes a lot of carbon dioxide, or emits a lot of carbon dioxide in the production. So much so that the difference between then driving on renewable energy, charging the car, versus driving on gas, you have to drive for 30, 40, 50,000 kilometers before you've even broken even on that.
And you move 2 tons, you move yourself.
Yeah.
And lots of car around.
So, but you feel good about it. I mean, I've seen plenty of people who feel like they're in a bicycle because they're an electric vehicle, even if it's a huge SUV electric vehicle. And so we get these kinds of trends that make it very difficult.
The balance, where do you find that balance of your moral scale, really?
I like, by the way, also to repair things. That I think is also a good habit to develop. In India, anyhow, they are masters of repair. But I like always, if something breaks down, I like to cloth. I gave it to stitching or some technical gadget. I always try to repair it. And it's a bit of a sad development that nowadays kitchen applicants or whatever, they have an inbuilt death date. And there was a study by the Green Party some years ago, and some gadgets like washing machine, they just last the 3 years where you have the warranty, and then 3.5 years it makes cling.
Exactly.
And a particular part goes, and quite often that part is not available.
Yeah. And it's called planned obsolescence. And that way you have to replace the entire washing machine. Yeah. So I'll do something that you're never supposed to do during a panel discussion. I'm going to pull out my cell phone. You're not supposed to do that. But to make a point on that, the cell phones are exactly what you're talking about. These are one of the major markets where people go to replace them very often. And it's through the obsolescence. I bought a Fairphone, which is a movement in Holland, in Europe, and there are a number of others like Shift phones and so on that are working towards this. It's great. I love it. And I had the Fairphone 1. I must have taken it apart a half dozen times and replaced the screen, replaced this and replaced that and so on, until it got to the point where the hardware wasn't able to run the Google Android system software for a high enough Android version to run the apps that I wanted to run. And so it basically still worked, but it wouldn't actually work in the modern day because we still move along so fast. And I go to the Fairphone 3 version. But this is again, this is a small corner of the market. It's the hippies, the modern hippies version of what you have running around. And I know from the others that I see running around with these things, and it's that version. And again, it comes back to your original question. What does this have to do with the Arctic and with the Antarctic and with the Himalayas and with the Andes and with the cryosphere on the whole? And it has a lot to do with it because our resource use connects to emissions, and those emissions connect to the changes in these vulnerable regions, and they suffer most because the snow reflection of sunlight, and when the snow melts, it absorbs more sunlight, and so that amplifies the whole signal of warming in this region.
Right, thank you so much for that insightful discussion. I think we have a lot of things for our audience to take away, and I'm just going to go one by one. For me, the personal thing was perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Please take that away. That is such a lovely quote, and it is for me. Actually, I'm a perfectionist. I have to do things the right way, or else I don't do it, and I lose the motivation. So that is something for me. And preserve cultures. I feel like what Mark touched upon, that yeah, systemic transformation is about adaptation. It is about transforming this, transforming those systems, transforming food systems. But how are we preserving the culture? Societal leg along that whole journey also is important. And kindness, solidarity, humaneness, like these are some key words, that there's a lack of respect. And that is something that really I see here at COP as well, that there are so many stories that are quality, that really that impact or that change, but they're not getting it because there's no respect for their story, and there's no respect for that nation. And I was having a discussion with one panelist yesterday, and she mentioned that it's a story of a remote village in India from Madhya Pradesh, and they don't have, it's about the women suffering there, but nobody's listening, and they're suffering so much. But because of so much of rainfall, so much of issues due to the land, and they don't have a voice. And I think respect is something that is important. Indigenous communities are now bringing forward their voice, and even from the Arctic. And that is something new for me. I learned that today, that there are indigenous communities also who are suffering, like they don't have a livelihood and in the Arctic. So, and from Golo, we learned that, motivation to do something different. Like you need to have that drive. And the foundation is, of course, ethics. But at the same time, for me, from my perspective, the takeaway from his answer was love. Love is the seed. I mean, why did he make that whole solar? He had the love for the planet. He had the love for that institution. He had the love for doing something, and that drives him towards doing something much more better for the institution or for himself. And we have that harmony, that compassion, and one line that he used was seeds of hope. So these are really seeds of hope, and I hope all of you uh, don't resist yourself into transforming or changing your lifestyle, changing your mindset. Yes, it is difficult, it is challenging. We've been brought up with certain, things that we do, certain lifestyle that we maintain, but there is a chance for us to change. And I would end the discussion on this. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel discussion. Thank you to our speakers.
Thank you very much.
And, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so